Operator, I need you to dial the number 6 for me, please.
Dude, I'm talking to you from the skate park. This is radical. Oh, you tag. Well, I'm no bludger, so I'm gonna hop back in me brumby before Roo or Wacker takes up the rest of me lunch break. Cheers, mate.
Vi har iPhone.
Well, you've done me proud, but it's time to move on to a new Oh, this is an intro. This video is months overdue, but whatever. I have a question for you, the viewer. What kind of phone do you have? A Samsung, Motorola, Apple, Nokia, BlackBerry? Because for a while now, about 3 years, I've been using this TCL 10L, and it is not this phone. I have been using this TCL 10L, and it is one of the best phones I've ever had. It costed $200, had a great battery life, and did almost everything that you would have expected it to do. And now it's getting replaced for some pretty big but simple reasons. But before we talk about the new phone that is replacing this guy, let's talk about all the cool features this phone, made by a major television manufacturer in China, had to offer and what makes it still kind of a great phone today. The TCL 10L just appeared on my Amazon one day, and I said, why not? After all, my old phone was starting to act up at the time, and this phone was cheap enough and should have decent performance for what I am paying. To start off, the phone was released on May 19th, 2020, and was offered with a choice between an Arctic White, a Marina Blue, and that's it. As far as options goes, this is all the choice you get from the US market at least. But despite that, you're given 64 gigs of storage, an IPS display with HDR, an amazing set of cameras, a no-nonsense octa-core CPU paired with 6 gigs of RAM, with tons of other creature comforts and useful features, all running on Windows 10. I mean, Android 10. 11? I think mine was upgrade 11. I digress. So let's talk about each part of this phone. Despite mine being beaten up pretty badly, it honestly is very durable. The frame is a combination of plastic and plastic with a sliver of metal coating to give it some rigidity. Add a case with it that deteriorated too much to the point that it falls off now, but even when I do drop it, which I feel like losing the case made it easier to hold on to, I never had to really worry about this thing cracking or outright exploding. Well, until recently, but more on that later. I couldn't find if Corning made the glass, but considering that it has some scratches here and there, but no cracks, it could be anyone. Still, likely it's Gorilla Glass or whatever. It came pre-applied with a plastic screen protector, which I peeled off at some point. I figured I should mention that. All I know is that the screen is legitimately nice despite the noticeable damage to it. Especially since, for 60 Hz, it doesn't seem too underwhelming. It is bright, it feels okay on the eyes, even though personally I find it a bit too big, but other than that, it does the job splendidly, especially for what I paid. As you can see, it runs smooth. Some phones at this age start to slow down a little, whether it be the battery or OS being too bloated after numerous updates, or the battery just being bloated itself. The Snapdragon 665 that was put in this phone is nothing really to write home about other than that it's 8 cores with 4 clocked at 2 GHz and the other 4 clocked at 1.8. But I think because it was paired with 6 GB of RAM, which most phones with the CPU at the time didn't seem to get, it allowed for the experience of running this phone day to day to not feel laggy, sluggish, bloated, or slow at times. I'm not kidding you when I say I haven't had a moment with this phone where it could have lagged briefly when opening a program or doing something crazy, even when I record videos with it or took photos. Which, by the way, this guy has been a lifesaver when it comes to making videos from time to time. I can record 1080p videos at 120 frames per second, or if I'm feeling a bit spicy, I can even record them at 4K resolution at 30 FPS. The quality of footage overall is, it's pretty legit. And that isn't where it stops. TCL really wanted to advertise its quad cameras, to which I think it's fair to push considering how nice they are. Just wish they dropped the whole AI thing because I can't find anything AI about what they're marketing. But because for what I paid, I was able to get an amazing 48 megapixel camera, which I didn't think would be all that impressive when I bought it. But just look at these photos. There were times where I needed to look at something with the highest definition, and this cheap Android phone certainly delivered. When taking a photo with this camera, it does take a few seconds to process, but I wouldn't count that as lagging or anything since it usually did this steadily, and I mean, it does make sense. It's developing a very high resolution photo. Cameras like these ones are becoming more popular or the standard for newer phones today, but I think this is still very nice considering the price at the time. The front-facing camera is a decent 16 megapixel and it was pretty alright. Didn't really use it though, I don't take selfies. And there are a couple of other cameras on the back that I am sure don't do much unless you are taking all sorts of photos with ultra-wide shots and whatnot. Maybe they are actually AI related? I couldn't say. Flashlight is pretty good to say the very least though. Yeah. Let's move on. Day-to-day use with this phone has always been great. I never found myself depending on it and being screwed because the battery died, which, by the way, the battery hasn't lost all that much charge over the years, and I used the heck out of this phone. Nowadays it needs to be charged before bed for sure, but with its 4000 milliamps, I was never left stranded, I feel. I know that isn't a lot, but to be fair, I'm not using this guy to play Fortnite or whatever the current mobile gaming market could be today. If you also haven't already noticed, yes, it has an aux port. I do be playing bangers when the aux doesn't get past me because that doesn't really happen anymore. I also really don't have a lot to say about the storage since 64 gigs isn't a lot, but at the same time, you can expand it up to 256 gigs with a micro SD card, and unless you're like a mom who really likes to take photos of her kids and the nature and whatever, it's nothing to make a big fuss about or whatever, so yeah, yeah. Now onto the problems that I have or have run into with this phone. There isn't much they have done wrong with this phone per se, especially with its useful features such as fingerprint reading, NFC, a programmable side button that I should have really used honestly, and facial recognition technology. But it feels pretty loaded. Too loaded even. Which to some people, they would love. Especially for that mom who took all those photos on that nature hike. And for $200? Why complain, right? More customization, choices, and options are nice. Well, I guess. I am a no-nonsense sort of guy. If I buy a cheap car with very few options, I'm pretty satisfied and I am not met with a bunch of surprises or extra goodies that get in the way of me using it. Just make sure I have an aux port somewhere, please. And by and large, having some of those features combined with Bluetooth has become a big deal to me when daily driving a phone. But I guess I am just complaining about having extra on my sandwich here when I could take off the tomatoes or lettuce if it's that big of a deal. It doesn't have 4G, just LTE, which means call quality is a little low. I already mentioned the phone is a bit big to me, despite having large hands. Otherwise, that's kind of it. Well, except for the durability of this phone. Wait, Budget Ben, you said this thing was pretty tough, or implied it to the very least. Yeah, I did. And I am pretty tough. Or rather, I am rough, is what I was implying. And I have two major problems with this phone currently. It has fast charging, which isn't a problem. It is actually very nice, and if I ever needed to add an extra hour of life in the span of 10 to 20 minutes of charging, it was useful. But it doesn't really work that well anymore. It also doesn't charge that well at all. Currently, that is. I think I damaged the port from constantly plugging it in and unplugging it, which, hey, that happens to all phones eventually down the line. But it does suck because this phone isn't very popular. I can't source good trusted parts easily like how I normally would and solder on a new charger port with a tutorial on how to do it online like how I could with most Apple products, or really any flagship Android phone. This wasn't the end of the world for me when it started happening, but it has been getting worse. Thank God this phone holds a decent charge at least. But here's something that is way worse than that though. The screen is great when it is on the phone. But I am partially to blame even though I think the adhesive over time due to human environments I was in started to fail. I sort of picked at the corner one day because I mindlessly messed with stuff in my hands, and I noticed that the screen/digitizer assembly had started to disconnect from the frame. I'm sure I could find a solution to fixing this, but I know I am just delaying the issue if I attempt to correct this problem instead of replacing it outright. So yeah, that sucks. I still love the phone though, and if I didn't depend on it so much right now, I would totally just ride this out until it literally fell apart. It is a great everyday phone, and I would give TCL another chance with another phone again, despite some of the reviews people have left about their experiences. However, I have other plans in mind for what will be my new daily driver that will replace this fella. But that is another video for another time. So, all in all, this was a great phone and was a fun video to make. I really wanted to dip my toes into less PC-oriented tech so I could share with you guys some cool, less talked about stuff. So if you like this video and want to see what the new phone will be, or more of this sort of stuff, go ahead and subscribe and stay tuned for that video. Comment if I got anything wrong, or if you think I am wrong. Maybe this phone actually sucks. I don't know. Just tell me something. Like the video, follow me on Twitter, join the Discord, yada yada yada. And oh, as always, thanks for watching.